Welcome back to the program. Pro-Palestinian protests are continuing across major U.S. universities. Despite crackdown by the police, nearly 900 people have been arrested since April 18th, when New York police forcefully removed a pro-Palestinian protest camp at Columbia University. Students at dozens of universities have since set up encampments calling for an end to the war in Gaza and for their universities to cut ties with companies selling weapons to Israel. Over the weekend, about 275 people were arrested from protests at Northeastern University in Boston, Arizona State University in Phoenix, Indiana University at Bloomington, University of California, Los Angeles, and Washington University in St. Louis.
They're peaceful protesters. There are students, and we must protect them. These are the future leaders. We have to protect them.
You know, representatives aren't listening to people. We are frankly funding this genocide, and I'm proud of the students, and I'm here to support.
They are encouraging racism and threats of safety and violence towards Jewish students, and it should be illegal.
Meanwhile, dozens of protesters have taken part in a pro-Palestinian motorcade in the Netherlands city of Rotterdam, demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. This happened on Sunday. The motorcade was decorated with Palestinian flags as passers-by greeted the protesters. The demonstrators chanted slogans to draw attention to the sufferings of civilians in Gaza.
Today, after more than 30,000 people died and killed by Israel in this genocide, we are continuing our work to be the voice of the people in Gaza. We are trying to create more awareness about the situation there, about the complicity of the Dutch government in this genocide. At the same time, we are trying to do it with more creative ways. Normally, we would do demonstration. Today, we are doing another way of protest, another form of protest, which is the car march, to get as much attention as possible. We are trying to reach every group of people in this society with multiple ways, and one of these ways is the car march of today, where we will be working, where we will be riding and driving in the streets of Rotterdam, trying to get attention to the situation in Palestine and in Gaza, trying to create more awareness about the genocide which is being committed there, and trying to convince the people that we have to say it loud and very clear that we need a ceasefire now.
So we're at the boycott action, and I'm going to support my friends here who are going to ask for attention in the city for Palestine and for boycotting Israel.
More reactions to the war in Gaza. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has criticized Western countries for their role in the Israeli-Hamas war. Mr. Ibrahim was speaking during the World Economic Forum on Sunday. He claimed Western countries had completely abdicated responsibility regarding the issue of Gaza. He mentioned that his country has established strong engagements with the United States and Europe, while also maintaining excellent bilateral relations with China, South Korea, and Japan.
See this in this light. So you must continue to play this role to engage, particularly those in the developing economies, emerging economies. Notwithstanding the complex situation, the turbulent times affecting the region, particularly the anger, frustration over the Palestinian issue in the Gaza crisis, that shows complete abdication of responsibility, particularly countries in the West. But notwithstanding that, the kingdom wants not to be completely distracted. The issue is important, it's fundamental to us. Malaysia is again fortunate in a region that is possibly most peaceful in the world, and the fastest growing economy. So we have to steer that policy issue of governance, of fiscal responsibility. At the same time, do not lose sight of the key priorities which is relevant in this session. The issue of globalization, of interdependence. We adopt a very fierce foreign policy position to engage and depend on the support, collaboration, investments from the West, the United States, Europe, at the same time maintain excellent bilateral relations with China, Korea, Japan.
The VOA's Ricky Rawson is in Tel Aviv. Ricky, great to see you. There's more pressure now on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to work towards release of hostages still being held by Hamas militants. I've been looking at those protests online, especially in Israel. Videos are emerging of these hostages online. How is the government responding to the calls?
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu is really between a rock and a hard place regarding a hostage release deal, because on one side there's the centrist politician Benny Gantz, who joined the government after October 7th in order to serve on a war cabinet, and he has said that if the government does not accept this last chance hostage deal, they will have no right to exist. On the other hand, there are the far-right ministers in the government coalition who have said that they will bring down the government if a hostage deal is accepted that will mean a ceasefire, a cancellation or delay of Rafah operation, military operation, and the release of hundreds or thousands of Palestinian prisoners with blood on their hands from Israeli jails.
Ricky, the pro-Palestinian protests are also increasing. I'm sure you've seen the videos from the United States, university students calling for institutions to cut ties with companies they believe are helping Israel to buy arms to fight Hamas. Given the number of deaths recorded in Gaza now, Jews on the campus don't feel safe anymore. Palestinians on the campus also do not feel safe anymore. Is that something that bothers Israelis back home?
I think that Israelis are not so concerned about the safety of Jewish students or Palestinian students in American universities, since they are actually fighting a war here in which almost 2,000 Israelis have been killed. But they are very concerned with the kind of isolation that Israel is finding itself on many international fronts. For example, universities have canceled cooperation with Israeli academics. Artists and performers have seen their shows canceled all over the world. Investors have pulled out of funding Israeli businesses. Most tourists have stopped coming. And so the condemnation of Israeli policies internationally does affect Israelis here even more than it's affecting Jewish students or Jews in general abroad.
The Israel-Hamas war conversation has also reached the World Economic Forum, which is holding in Saudi Arabia. It brings to mind negotiations of a ceasefire going on in Cairo. I think they continue today. Is Israel willing to enforce a ceasefire to help douse the tensions and possibly alleviate some of the backlash it's receiving from these groups that you mentioned?
Well, there is a sense that the ceasefire talks in Cairo may actually succeed this time. If, as I said before, Prime Minister Netanyahu is able to maneuver the opposing sides in his far-right coalition. For one thing, the Israelis trust the Egyptians as mediators more than they did Qatar, because Qatar has always been a supporter of Hamas, while the Egyptians have maintained the same blockade of Hamas on their border with Gaza as the Israelis have. And also, the U.S. has made it clear that they have very strong objections to Israel sending troops into Rafah, and some American officials even warned that they would restrict some of the arms supplies to Israel if Israel does not accept a ceasefire and refrain from a Rafah military operation.
It was Mahmoud Abbas, the former Palestinian leader, the Palestinian leader who controls the West Bank, I believe, who mentioned the issue of Rafah yesterday, and he was calling on the U.S. government to implore on Israel not to continue with the invasion of Rafah. Does the Prime Minister insist on going ahead with that operation?
Well, it remains to be seen. If there is a credible hostage deal on the table, then he is said to agree to a ceasefire for at least 6 weeks and not go ahead into Rafah. But he is holding it, it seems, as his card, his most significant card on the table, that he's prepared to go into Rafah at any point if the hostage deal falls through. The Americans have warned him that without any kind of credible solution for the 1.7 million Palestinians who are in Gaza, in Rafah right now, that he can't possibly go into a military operation there. They say, Netanyahu says that they have plans in place for moving Palestinians out of Rafah and that they have tents for housing them outside of the city. But it remains to be seen whether he would actually go ahead in the face of very vehement U.S. objections.
Speaking of the U.S., Ricky, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is also in Saudi Arabia. He is expected to discuss the war with Saudi authorities. Does Israel consider Saudi Arabia an ally in this war by U.S. association?
Saudi Arabia is not yet an ally of Israel, although the Americans are working very hard to make that alliance happen. But in a very surprising move, the Saudis, together with the Jordanians, helped defend Israel 2 weeks ago again when Iran launched the 350 missiles against Israel. And so they are showing that they are open to an alliance, especially when it would be an alliance against Iran. And it's thought by Israeli analysts that a Saudi peace deal might be the only thing which might convince Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the Gaza war and to hand over rebuilding Gaza to the neighboring Arab countries, because then he could point to this peace deal as a very significant achievement, which might save his political position and his government.
Somehow he still thinks he will be Prime Minister even after this war. Thanks again, Ricky, for speaking with us.
Thank you.